listening to the MMA Brothers Podcast, coming to you from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Your source for UFC news, previews, and post-fight coverage. Hosted by your favorite duo, Daryl and Asher. Let's get it started.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the MMA Brothers Podcast. My name is Asher, and today I have a guest with us. His name is Ness. Ness, how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. So, just a little intro on Ness. Ness is an amateur Muay Thai fighter. He's from Brampton, Ontario, Canada, and he's joining us on Scarborough. My bad, bro. Scarborough.
Okay, it's okay, man.
It's because of my other partner. That's why I assumed Brampton.
It's okay,
so my
man.
bad.
It's okay.
Yeah, Scarborough, Ontario, Canada.
That's
And
TJ. TJ's from Brampton. Shout out Tambiganju.
Yeah. So, and yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit of Muay Thai, and we're going to talk about who the GOAT of the UFC is, or maybe let's just say MMA in general, because I know there's some people outside of the UFC.
I'm glad you said that, because GOAT of the UFC is a different conversation than GOAT MMA GOAT, right? So I'm glad we make that distinction up front. Okay, sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, don't worry. We're gonna have both. We're gonna have the UFC GOAT and then the overall MMA GOAT, so we can split it that way. So we're gonna be talking about that today. And so first, before we hop into that, let's talk a little bit of Muay Thai, and then I guess how your Muay Thai career got started. So how did you fall into Muay Thai, and how did you fall in love with the sport?
To be honest with you, man, it was something that I always wanted to try, and I got to a point in my life where I turned 29, and then I like a month or so after my birthday, I asked myself, like, am I ever gonna try this or not? And if I do it, like, I want to be ready before I'm 30, right? So
you're still here. You're still here.
Okay,
I can hear you.
So I just started as a hobby, man, and then like I competed last year for the first time about a year ago now. In my first tournament, I had like an in-house like fight, but that doesn't really count for your record. But I competed in the first tournament almost a year ago to around this time, and it took me about 3 years to get to that. Well, 2.5 years to get to that point too, man. So, and then it's just honestly now at this point, I just want to see like how. Like, I just want to see for myself, like, personally, how good I am or what the growth I've made as a student of Muay Thai. So that's why I want to continue to compete.
Nice. So in amateur Muay Thai competition, are you guys going at it, or like do you have protection?
Well, we have protection for sure, right? So we've got headgear, we've got shin guards, mouth guard, cup, 10-ounce gloves. Yeah, so we've got full gear and stuff like that, right? In different divisions, they can also do elbows, so they'll wear like elbow pads and stuff like that. Yeah, it's at the professional level is when you have no full contact, right? Yeah.
Okay. And so in terms of that type of competition, the amateurs, I know knockouts can still happen with like protection, but is it like the scoring system the same? Like, is it like a point scoring system? Because I know like in karate, like they kind of do it that way, right? Like point scoring.
It's scoring, but you can get a stoppage,
Because body shots, right?
I mean, I don't want to brag, but both of my fights at the tournament were stoppages. First one was a referee stoppage, and then the second one was a doctor stoppage by a cut. So, like, I'm trying to be humble, but it is possible to stop guys.
Brag, bro, brag. It's all good. That's awesome, man. Yeah, for me, I've done a little bit of Muay Thai. I never got to the competition point where I'm competing against other people, but it's fun, man. I loved it. And I think it's one of the more, I guess, brutal martial arts, because then like you're combining the knees and the elbows and stuff as well, the kicks and the punches. But sorry, what are you gonna say?
That's the thing. People assume it's like that, but the people that I train with, and shout out to my gym, like Naka Muay Thai, and like my old gym Ayutthaya, like, and the people that there are Ajan, like everybody, these are like we're like a family. So it's like, you're not gonna kill each other, because then nobody's gonna want to play with you again. We're playing, you know what I mean? When we're training, we're just playing. And it's fun. Like, for me, I don't play basketball or like football or soccer. Like that's not for me. You know what I mean? But I like doing this, and I'm not going to hurt my training partners, and I want to help them get better so that they can help me get better as well, right? So like we take care of each other. It's only really when you're training for a competition or at a competition when you ramp up the intensity and it's a little bit more physical, obviously. But even then, I would argue that at the amateur level, at least, it's not as brutal as like other contact sports are, you know?
100%. Yeah, like
And I'm not taking
um
shots at any other sports. I'm just saying, like, to change the perception that Muay Thai is a really violent sport. You know, it is a violent sport. It is very violent. Like, but that's the professional level. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
we'll get there one day.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. Let's cut that out. Let's cut that out.
No. I mean, it's you never know. Maybe you can get there one day.
Yeah.
Don't sell yourself short. So I know like it's dangerous when it comes to the professionals, but like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like you got to do what you love, right? So
Yeah, man.
yeah. So I remember you had said like you had done a really, really long distance run one time. Was it from Toronto to Scarborough? Is that where you ran or?
Yeah. So I used to live downtown. So I ran from where I was living downtown at my condo to my mom's house, which is where I grew up in Scarborough, which
Mm-hmm.
is around Warden and 401 for those who are familiar with the Scarborough area. So I went from basically uh, the Lakeshore and where Air Canada Center is, or what Scotiabank Arena now, or whatever is, to basically Warden and 401.
And how long is that in kilometers, like the run?
It's exactly a half a marathon, so it's 21 kilometers, which is kind of funny, which is also why it kind of like motivated me to make that run, because it just happened to be like almost the perfect half marathon distance, right? I think a
Mm,
half marathon is like 21.8 or 21 and a half or something like that.
right. Wow. That's impressive, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just quick thing, a little fun fact. Did you know that they host marathons in the Great Wall of China? Like you can do it like up and down like the Great Wall and
Yeah,
stuff. Have you heard about this?
I would love to do that someday, man. But like those are the kinds of like I don't like running. Like I really don't. Like I only did it because I had actually signed up to do a half marathon, and then because of COVID and all that, it didn't happen. So that's the only reason why I did it. But if I were to ever do another marathon like that, it would have to be like something scenic, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I've never done a half marathon before. I have a long way to go to get my cardio
Yeah.
there. But if I would ever to do one, it would be there for sure. But yeah, we can transition now to some MMA talk. So
Yeah, for
we're gonna
sure.
be talking about the goats of UFC and MMA in general. So I guess it's only right to start with the UFC, and then we can go outside the UFC and then kind of give some highlights to who we think can be on that list. But we'll start with the UFC. So who's your UFC goat?
If you're talking UFC GOAT, man, honestly, okay, first off, I think what you need to do is define what your version of GOAT is. Like
Mm-hmm.
greatest of all time, and then are we talking greatest of all time just in the arena, like in the octagon, or are we talking about their character as well? Because then we get into a different discussion there as well, right? So if we're talking strictly greatest combat skills,
Mm-hmm.
forget the character, forget the person, then I would have to say the greatest of all time. I don't think that person has yet to establish themselves. Like you could say that, like that's my hot take. I don't think there actually is a GOAT right now. So for the way I see it is GOAT is basically you handing in your resume at the end of your career saying, look at my resume and what have I done. So then you have what have you accomplished, right? Like let's take for example, now everybody's super hot on Khabib. But the reality of it is that although Khabib has turned in some very impressive, like dominant, flawless victories, he's done this to his contemporaries. A GOAT is somebody who's going to do that, clear out their division essentially. And while he's doing that, you've got the guys that are on the come up, like the number 18, the number 20, guys like that you and I don't know about, that are now watching Khabib, learning his style, breaking it down, and training for that. So you have to beat the new generation. That's why what John Jones is doing is, despite what you may think of him, you have to give him his credit because he beat the old guard. He took out the legends, all those guys. Like he did basically what Khabib did, right? Up until Gus won. And,
Mm-hmm.
and and then if you believe the rumors, how he didn't train for that, and he was just partying, and that's a different topic as well too, right? Sorry about my camera angle.
Yeah,
Just
no worries.
So he basically did the exact same thing, and then he started fighting the new breed, the Dominic Reyes, the Thiago Santos, you know what I mean? The Anthony Smiths, those fights, you know what I mean? Like even Gus too, DC, right? He beat then his peer group. Khabib is kind of exiting his career, and he's exiting for his own personal reasons, and all the more power and all the respect to him. He's actually doing something that is smart. He's retiring at the peak, at his most profitable point of his career. He can capitalize and do so much more. You know what I mean? But Khabib is yet to prove to me that he can beat the new people, the new breed that somebody like John Jones is doing. So then I get into the idea of, is it harder to win the belt and have a few highlight wins, or to then establish a reign of dominance? Something like somebody like Anderson Silva did. Like Anderson Silva, like I know he's also had a fight recently, and it wasn't the best turnout. You know what I mean? And hate to see something like that happen to him. But it is what it is, man. Like he's kind of at that point of his career, right? But if you take the first half of his career in the not in the UFC, I guess, but even from Pride and things that he was doing before, he was the GOAT, right? So at the end of the day, it's also GOAT consideration is also when you call it a career, call it end. You know what I mean? Like it's also a little bit how you strategically maneuver your resume. And I love GSP, and for the longest time I would say that and I still think that if anybody has a claim to GOAT, it's GSP. But even GSP, his timing to middleweight to get that second champ belt, that's a little suspect because it was Bisping. Let's call it what it is. He saw an opportunity. He knew that he was technically better than Bisping everywhere else. But GSP is not going to stick around to fight the Yoel Romeros, the Whitakers, the Izzies of the middleweight division. You know what I mean? Because that means you have to now fight the new guard and establish that. GSP doesn't need to do that. He's already proven that. You know what I mean? But he also just wanted champ, middleweight champ on his resume, and he saw an opportunity to take it. I'm not gonna hate him for that. I still think he's the GOAT because of what he did at welterweight. You know, not considering the last fight, Johnny Hendricks fight, but let's not forget my guy Johnny Hendricks was juiced to the
That was pre USADA, yeah.
juiced to the gills, man. You know what I mean? Like, and look at where Johnny's at now. Like, I'm not throwing shade, but it is what it is, man. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's why GSP took that time off, because if if you know, GSP was trying to get drug testing in the UFC before USADA was established,
Mm-hmm.
because he knew what was going on.
Right.
You know,
No,
so
so
sorry,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So if you ask me who the GOAT is in the UFC, I would have to say there isn't one, because everybody has a flaw. And GOAT to me is almost, it's got to be perfect. And the only person that's about to establish that is Israel Adesanya. You know what I mean? Say his name right, but he's the only one because he's undefeated in the UFC. He's dominant. Like, he's dominant. He's taking out everybody in his division, and now he's moving up to. He's also doing something what GSP did, which is he sees an opportunity to beat a champion above him that he knows that he's technically better than. So, but I have faith that Izzy will not only take that belt, but he's gonna fight John Jones, which will cement him in different ways. You know what I mean? I don't know if Izzy's going to stick around at 205. to defend. But I mean, if you take the 205 belt and then you fight John Jones as well, then then you say I'm retiring now, you're the GOAT. You know what I mean? Especially what you did at middleweight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. It's
John Jones.
interesting how,
I'll be straight up. John Jones will never be my GOAT because of all the drug violations. You know what I mean? Like it's just, at a certain point you can believe the performance, you know, pills or whatever he took or whatever excuses he had. You know what I mean? But like you can do it once. Like Anderson Silva got busted once, and he said he got some Thai sex juice, and it was
that
tainted.
was post his leg break too, right? Like he tested positive for some steroid after he broke his leg. So
Right.
it's like,
So
yeah,
I mean, I don't want to say I'm gonna give him a pass for that, but I can understand that versus multiple infractions. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
John Jones has multiple infractions, and we're not even talking about his, uh, like outside of the octagon, situations. We're just talking
yeah,
about inside of the octagon. You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, uh, that fight with DC, like that second fight where he said, DC, you always drop your hand. I'm gonna, what was it?
Head kick
Right
him.
kick, yeah, head kick,
Hmm.
and then boom. Like, okay, but you got to get to the third, fourth round to still have the stamina to be able to head kick him. How do you know that that's not what the supplements are doing? You know what I mean? Because like after a few after a few exhausting rounds, man, it's hard to throw power shots and stuff like that. And DC's a big guy too. So
Mm. Yeah, I know. I obviously there's no room for performance enhancing drugs, and it's tough because like when you look at a resume, to me like John Jones is clearly the GOAT. Like I know GSP's done like a lot in the 170-pound division. He has a lot of title defenses, but he did lose twice in that division. Jones hasn't lost technically. I
right,
know.
but here's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm not denying like what GSP's done with him being clean and then getting all those title defenses. Anderson Silva tested positive, and so has Jones. So there is something to say for GSP being number one, and I totally get that, right? But when you look at Jones's resume, like with what you said, past, present, and future, right? Dominic Reyes is the future of the division. You could say he won that fight, but like whatever, right? He's fought the Reyeses of the world. He's fought like the Rashad Evanses, the Machidas, the Rampage Jacksons, all those guys when he was like 23, 24 years old, and he beat them soundly,
Yeah.
dominating these guys. And there's one thing to say, like, oh, Jones is a positive, but I'm like, do you know the guys that Jones was facing when he was 24 years old? All of them were in TRT, like name
Yeah.
whatever substance they're on
Yeah.
it, right? And Jones
Listen.
was dominating these guys. So it's
I'm not.
like that's why I'm just coming to a perspective that like yes, it is true that maybe Jones is taking, or if you believe he has, yes, he has. But at the same time, it was almost a level playing field. Almost everybody was taking that
Yeah.
stuff, and this guy was still smuggling. Chael Sonnen said himself, "I was on so many PEDs when I first faced John Jones, and this guy just wrecked me like there was nothing. Like
Yeah.
I was a little boy against a man. You know what I mean? Like that's how good this guy was. So." Yes, you can make the steroid argument. I get that, but like skills are skills, right? I can take
Yeah.
steroids. I'm not gonna have the same skills that John Jones has, right?
Yeah.
And also, Jones is not like an
But
Ngannou where
that's
like if he did take PEDs where he's just so strong and he's touching dudes' chins and he's knocking them out.
yeah.
Like he's never been that guy.
Right.
So
But I think
go ahead.
this is where I think it's also like entering into the discussion of the idea of that PEDs is not just to get you stronger, but it also can give you cardio and endurance benefits and boosts as well too, right? Like that's what
Mm,
TJ Dillashaw got busted for. It wasn't
yeah,
that he was strong. It was just that I think his was weight cutting supplements that were banned,
EPO. Yeah,
and also what was the other thing? Just like something to do with his EPO, like like you were saying, with this to give him more better cardio, essentially, right?
yeah.
So
Because I remember he was saying that like he was struggling to make 125 and train. Like he could do the weight cut, but like he had no energy to fight pretty much or to go to the gym. So
yeah,
that's why he took the EPO, which obviously is cheating.
yeah, like so there's a lot of, and then it gets to the point that if you're talking strictly wins and losses, then you have to consider and I hate to be that person, but you have to consider no contest as well. So
Mm,
technically that one of the fights with DC is a no contest because of the drug violation. And then if you're looking at GOAT and you look at the resume, then you have to ask, why is that a no contest? Oh, he got busted for steroids. So you have to consider that. You know what I mean? Like GSP was fighting juiced up guys as well. You know what I mean? Like GSP lost to Matt Hughes, who some people suspect was on steroids. I don't know. You know what I mean? I didn't come into the MMA like fandom until after that. So I wasn't aware. I wasn't as dialed in at that time. And his other loss was a loss that he avenged. The one to Matt Serra. You know what I mean? Shout outs to Matt Serra. Like he got him. You know what I mean? And that completely changed GSP's perspective on the game. You know, but to me, that just shows that he can bounce back. We have yet to see John Jones lose, but we've seen John Jones be tested. And arguably, like, if you know, again, some people say that Dominic Reyes beat John Jones, you know, and then he got gifted a decision. And to me, to be honest with you, there's another fight as well. I remember watching, and I forget who it was. It might have been the Anthony Smith fight, but I remember watching thinking, this isn't the same John Jones as the one that came up where he was just dominating people.
Oh yeah, he struggled to finish Anthony Smith, and I was kind of like, Jones can finish his fight. Why is he just being like weird about it? I don't know, it's weird.
Right. To me, that reminded me a lot of like when Anderson Silva, which a lot of Anderson Silva fans neglect, he had his fights with like Patrick Cote. Shout out to Patrick Cote from Quebec, Canada. You know what I mean? Like, that was a very awkward fight. He didn't really engage, and then Patrick Cote blew out his knee, and then they called that fight off. And then Anderson had that weird fight, the first fight, I think, when the UFC went to, I don't know if it was Abu Dhabi or Dubai, when Anderson Silva fought Damian Maia. And it was one of the worst fights. You know what I mean? Anderson didn't engage. Like, people don't want to talk about those fights, but
yeah,
like, sometimes you have stinkers, but then John Jones keeps going. You know what I mean? Like, and like even the Thiago Santos fight, you know, like John Jones like was lighting him up. And don't get me wrong, I thought John Jones won that fight, but the fact that he wasn't like utterly dominant the way that he was made it's not that he's struggling against his competition. He clearly, you know, it now in his head, his perspective on the game has changed as well. He's not going to, like, when he fought Shogun, he ran at him with a flying knee. The first thing he did. He's not that young, crazy kid anymore. So he's not going to do that to Thiago Santos, who's just hobbling around on barely one foot at that point. You know? Because he's got too much to lose.
Yeah.
You know? So his game, the perspective on his game changes as well.
I was gonna say, kind of like it's like the Floyd Mayweather effect. Floyd Mayweather used to like knock dudes out earlier in his career, but then later on he became this like defensive fighter. And I think it's kind of like Jones a little bit, where it's like he has such a strong resume and he has a lot to lose every time he goes into the octagon. So he's become more defensive, right? Like he's not throwing flying knees like he used to, or spinning heel kicks and all these crazy attacks. Like he's kind of like more settled as a fighter now, even though he can still do some of those crazy techniques. It's kind of like, I don't want to risk it all, right? Like I've come this far.
He's not as reckless too, because sometimes, man, after a while, like it's people catch on to that. You know what I mean? And the more footage of you there is, the more things there are to break down of you. So your game has to keep evolving. You know what I mean? So like, that's what I mean. Like, it's harder to sit on the throne and keep defending like wave after wave of contenders, which John Jones is doing, or which John Jones did. You know what I mean? PD accusations and failed drug tests aside. Same thing with GSP.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so in terms of the Khabib, I think we both agree Khabib hasn't put up enough of a resume in the UFC in order to be considered the GOAT. He is the most dominant. He's the most dominant UFC fighter of all time. I would agree.
Here's the other thing that I want to say: pound for pound, Khabib has probably a better claim, pound for pound. Because for me, pound for pound, what that means, it's actually a term from boxing that MMA people have used. What it means is, if regardless of weight classes, would your skill sets beat another guy's skill sets? And Khabib
like if everybody weighed the same, right?
If everybody weighed the same. would Khabib be able to do to John Jones what he's done to everybody else? And based off of his resume alone, you have to say yes, because Khabib has been flawless, like almost.
So here's another thing I can say though. Demetrius Johnson, you haven't mentioned him today. I'd never consider him in the GOAT for me because like I just feel like the 125 division is so shallow, and like the opponents there, like the people that used to fight. Like when I watched the flyweight fight and I saw them go at it, I was kind of like yes, they're fast and stuff, but like they just some of these people just are lacking in skill compared to Demetrius Johnson, right? So I almost felt like it was a little bit unfair to give him the GOAT with the 10 title defenses and stuff because like the division isn't there. Kind of like Amanda Nunes. Yes, Amanda Nunes is the GOAT of 135 and 145, but
Amanda
like
Nunes is a female GOAT. Like,
she is. She is.
All combat sports.
Of all, exactly. So to me, it's kind of like yes, like and Amanda Nunes is that good, but like at the same time, like there's just not as much talent in the 145-pound division. 135, she's beat all the champions that have been there. She beat Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, Misha Tate, Cyborg, whatever. Like you name them, Amanda Nunes has beat all of them. So when I go back to Mighty Mouse, I'm kind of just like I just feel like yes, he was super skilled in pound for pound. He has a claim to say he's pound for pound number one because that guy's skills, from his Muay Thai to his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, like he's solid everywhere. You know what I mean? So. But then again, he did lose to Dominic Cruz.
If you want to talk about, well, this is why I haven't brought up DJ, is if you're going to talk about GOAT across MMA, then I got to say DJ's got to be at least top 3. Because his fight with Cejudo, highly controversial. Because at a certain point, too, you have to start talking about the decisions of fights as well. Like, and the actual fight and how it happened. Like his fight was very controversial. He left. He's still undefeated, by the way, in ONE FC, where I think he's got 3 wins right now. I can't remember the names of who he's fighting, but he's still competing and he's still I wouldn't say undefeated, but DJ also, all of his other losses as well have come in divisions that were above him, you know, and those were a top tier talent to guys that are above him. So he might not be pound for pound, like in that sense, but then at that time too, his game was developing. You know, so to me, I'm a big Mighty Mouse fan. I don't necessarily think he's clear-cut number 1 because, again, like I said earlier, there really isn't anybody yet to establish that, to take that GOAT crown because everybody's got a flaw. The only person is Izzy, but he still hasn't cemented his legacy. Khabib, if Khabib had stuck around and Khabib he beat Gaethje, he needed to answer that Tony Ferguson question. Like that's a huge question that's going to haunt true UFC fans for a while. Tony versus.
But it's not his fault. It's not his fault.
It's nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault. But when you're going to talk about it, you got to talk about it, which is what if somebody with really good jiu-jitsu fought Khabib? Because I'm not saying that like Dustin Poirier doesn't have good jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that there's been other guys that he hasn't fought that haven't had good jiu-jitsu. It's that Tony's game is completely different as well, right? Like, so he needs, that's a question from Khabib that we haven't had an answer to. Then Khabib has done something, GSP and John Jones have done something that Khabib hasn't done, which is they've beaten guys multiple times. Like they've beaten, like GSP's beaten BJ Penn twice, Koscheck twice. I
think he beat Matt Hughes twice, if I'm not mistaken.
Matt Hughes twice, yes, because that was a trilogy fight. And there might have been another rematch that I can't remember as well. But John Jones as well.
Matt Serra, he fought Matt Serra and beat him the second time.
Well, yeah.
It wasn't twice, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Right, but sometimes it's even harder to beat a guy, especially when you have a game plan that they know, and then they get a feel for your game plan, and then they come back a second time prepared. Khabib hasn't answered that question yet either, right? Because whether you want to give him credit or not, the only person that had success against Khabib, and I think in a round, was Conor. And Conor, whatever you want to say, keeps saying that he's got the answer and he wants one more try. And, you know, as an MMA fan, and you want to see that as well. You
Mm-hmm.
want to see what Conor could do if he got another crack. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
granted that obviously he got another win against somebody like Dustin Poirier. Like, if Conor beats Dustin Poirier and they make it for a title belt, you're telling me that you wouldn't want to have seen Khabib versus Conor too?
I know the UFC is gonna want to favor that matchup because I know some hardcore MMA fans are gonna say like, no, that 30-0 should be reserved for someone like Tony Ferguson or GSP, not Conor McGregor. But the UFC is gonna book Conor McGregor. If he beats Dustin Poirier next, you're gonna see like summer 2021 Conor McGregor
Here's
versus Khabib 2
if you're
for the final retirement fight of the night, the biggest fight of all time. They're gonna promote it so big, you know. So
if you're a
yeah.
true Khabib fan, then you'd want it to be Conor because Khabib will make the most money off of that. And I mean, if you believe in your guy, you believe in your guy. He utterly dominated him the first time, and
Mm-hmm.
that will bring him like Conor is what made Khabib blow up this big. Say what you will at this point, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That will bring him global exposure in so many levels that unfortunately guys like as much as I love Tony Ferguson are not going to bring him. GSP might do it, but as a GSP fan, I'd rather not see that because I'd rather like it's as much as I think GSP would win, I think it's a hard fight for GSP. You know,
Right.
I'd rather let Conor take another L just to see. You know,
Yeah.
no
So
disrespect to the notorious one, but it is what it is.
it is what it is. I was gonna ask, so outside of the UFC, who's your MMA goat?
Outside the UFC, I'd have to say DJ has a good case for it. Fedor also has a good case for it. Those are the two big ones that you got to obviously take into consideration, right? Um, I think that's about. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because like I think it would be fun to see Izzy against some guys that are in Bellator right now. You know, like the Douglas Limas, the MVPs, like those guys. Musasi, like that'd be fun because I feel like in terms of MMA as a whole, there's some middleweight questions that Izzy can continue to answer, and that would further his claim to the GOAT title. You know. But I don't think I don't MMA is still very 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 new as a sport. You know what I mean? Almost as new as I am to this podcasting thing. That's why this video angle keeps messing up. Sorry, man. But
It's all good, bro.
MMA I think it's like less than 30 years old, man. Like so
Yeah,
to start even saying this guy's the GOAT, that guy's the GOAT, it's very premature. People are very excited and obviously it gives people like us something fun to talk about, you know, and I love it because I sit around hearing so many conversations about NBA and NFL and NHL goats, and I never relate to that, but this is something I relate to. So it's great to see the sport grow and blow up to these levels, you know.
100%. So yeah, outside the UFC, definitely Demetrius Johnson. Yes, there's a case for Fedor, but Fedor has lost multiple times, and I don't know if he's still in Bellator, but he obviously lost the Grand Prix for the heavyweight
Yeah,
championship to Bader and stuff. So um yeah, at the end of the day, they all have cases. I guess it comes down to your opinion, but for me, overall GOAT is still John Jones. I know a lot of people hate that because of his PED
yeah,
accusations, or his failed test, I should say.
yeah.
But he's still going. Israel Adesanya, like you said, he has a chance to make a real name for himself right now. I think he's 20-0. And
I
you know,
think
he
he's 19.
19 or 20-0,
Yeah,
one of those. And you know, Izzy only has
and
two title
and
defenses so far.
and
And I
people
know he's
forget
not
that.
that young. He's 31. So, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
and people forget that Izzy had a professional kickboxing career. Way like I think he was something like 80 and like 3 or something like
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah.
people don't know, you know what I mean about that. So Izzy's also done multiple sports at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because kickboxing is a very different animal than um, MMA. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So
Yeah. So yeah, no, definitely I'm excited to see where Izzy's career is gonna go. Now a lot of people are sleeping on Jan Blachowicz and they're thinking that Izzy's just gonna run through him. But Jan has won like 7 or out of his last 8 or 8 of his last
John,
9, most
yeah,
of them by KO or TKO. So it's like I don't know what
Jan's
Jan's
an
gone
animal.
through. I don't know,
Beyonce.
because I was telling this the other day. I was like, I don't understand what this guy has done in his career, because he's like 37, 38 right now. How he's had this resurgence all of a sudden, just knocking dudes out, because he's a 50-50 fighter before. Then
Yeah.
I don't know if it's coaching or whatever it is, but like he's just a different fighter now. So
And to be honest with you, it's kind of opportunity as well that worked out for him too, right? Like sometimes it's just about staying in shape and grinding and continuing to, because a lot of times as well, man, like it's the motivation, right? Like I see some guys that are really talented in the gym and it's like, well, like, but they're not consistent. You know what I mean? And it's like, then what is your motivation, right? So sometimes some guys just dial in, like, and sometimes they dial out, like, so in order to be considered the GOAT, like you got to be dialed in. Like that's something that Khabib did. He was always dialed in. He never had
mm,
like a night off. He never had like a day off. Like where John Jones, maybe he didn't train, or maybe he just had a bad night. You know what I mean? Like the people that are saying he didn't train are obviously people that are in his corner. So maybe your boy just got caught. Because he's had a few suspect fights. Gus won. Dominic Reyes.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But I think, yeah, we'll end this conversation right now.
Fun combo, man.
I'm
Fun combo.
it, definitely. For anybody that's listening, please let us know what you thought about it, and let us know who your GOAT is. I'm interested, and I'll definitely hit you up in the comments. But yeah, Ness, thank you for joining this podcast. It was a lot of fun, and we'll do it again soon.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, no worries. We'll do it next time. See ya.
All right, take care.
Later.
Thanks for listening to the MMA Brothers Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please give us a follow on our socials. You can check out a description of this episode for more, but don't forget to connect with us on Instagram at MMA Brothers Pod. We'll see you on the next episode.